Imagine you're having just the absolute worst day of your life. I mean, maybe you got totally chewed out by your boss, or maybe you dropped your phone screen first onto the concrete and just watched it shatter in slow motion, right? You finally drag yourself home, you don't say a word, you barely make a sound, you just walk through the door, drop your bag, and completely slump onto the couch. And your pet, who has honestly spent the entire day aggressively napping, immediately walks over, puts their head right in your lap, and just stares at you. So, how did they know? You didn't cry, you didn't explain a single thing, yet something in the air shifted and they literally felt it before you even sat down. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to completely unpack the science of cross-species empathy. Because that heartwarming little moment in your living room, it isn't just cute, it's actually one of the most scientifically fascinating things happening on this entire planet.
Okay, let's dive into this by taking a quick look backwards. Because honestly, it took researchers an embarrassingly long time to admit out loud that animals actually have emotions. If you've ever had a pet, you probably figured this out within your first 48 hours together, for sure. But science, bless its cautious little heart, needed roughly a century of really heated debates to finally get there. For most of the 20th century, the dominant view in biology was this concept you see here, behaviorism. Basically, it was the idea that animals were essentially just biological machines. Under this model, they didn't actually feel things, they just reacted to stimuli. Like a dog wagging its tail wasn't expressing joy, it was merely executing a hardwired behavioral response pattern. It was a very clinical, very tidy way of looking at the world, and frankly, it's exactly how someone who has literally never lived with a dog would describe a dog. But eventually, that biological machine model started to crack. Researchers saw chimpanzees going through these profound, prolonged periods of social withdrawal after losing companions, which, looked exactly like human depression. They saw elephants making massive, miles-long detours just to gently touch the bones of deceased herd members. Machines don't grieve. Machines definitely don't visit the dead. Which brings us away from that cold, clinical history and right to the central, heartwarming mystery of our explainer today. Do animals actually know when you're sad? It kind of sounds like a phrase you'd see embroidered on a decorative pillow, right? Sentimental, fluffy, not exactly peer-reviewed. But underneath that soft exterior is a question that cuts to the absolute core of evolutionary biology and neuroscience.
To really answer that question, we have to look at the evolutionary hardware. When neuroscientists started looking super closely at the brains of mammals, they found something that completely reframed the conversation. The limbic system, which is the network of brain structures that processes emotions in us humans, isn't a human invention at all. It's actually present, in varying degrees of complexity, across virtually all mammals. Emotion isn't something humans miraculously invented out of nowhere. It's this ancient biological tool, hundreds of millions of years old, that evolution kept around simply because it works. Fear keeps an animal away from predators. Attachment keeps social animals bonded in groups so they survive better. Grief signals the loss of something vital. So animals absolutely have the neurological hardware for emotion. They aren't machines, they're deeply feeling creatures. But the next logical question is, can they actually read the emotional state of a totally different species? Like, can they read us?
Well, to figure that out, we need to look at the evolutionary contracts we've essentially signed with our pets. Let's contrast dogs and cats. Dogs have lived intimately alongside humans for anywhere from 15 to 40,000 years. They were actively bred to work with us, both socially and emotionally. In fact, research actually shows dogs process human faces using a left gaze bias, meaning they instinctively look right to the side of our faces where our emotions are most visible. They literally evolved specific cognitive machinery just to read us. But what about cats? Cats were definitely not domesticated for emotional labor. Their evolutionary contract was entirely different. They were domesticated primarily for pest control. They were bred to work near humans, hunting mice in our grain stores, while pretty much just doing their own thing. And because of this, cats have kind of earned a reputation for being aloof, distant, and totally emotionally indifferent to our human struggles.
Section 1. Cats, the bespoke emotional map.
And this brilliantly illustrates how modern science is systematically dismantling that stereotype of the aloof cat. Let's look at this absolutely fascinating study from Oakland University. The researchers tracked what they call affiliative behaviors, which are basically just warm, friendly things like approaching, purring, and rubbing. When a cat's owner smiled, these warm behaviors were incredibly high. But when the owner frowned, the cats became noticeably withdrawn and cautious. The real kicker, though, is the stranger. When a stranger smiled or frowned, the cats barely adjusted their behavior at all.
This reveals something so profound about the unique emotional intelligence of cats. Unlike dogs, who evolved to read human faces in a very general sense over tens of thousands of years, Cats haven't evolved a general-purpose human face reader. Instead, they've done something arguably much more intimate. Your cat has spent years studying you. They learn your specific microexpressions, the particular sounds you make when you're stressed out, the way you physically move your body when something is wrong. They build a highly individualized, bespoke emotional map of their specific human. The big takeaway here isn't that they know what humans look like when they're sad. The takeaway is that they know exactly what you look like when you're sad.
Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. Horses, emotional time travelers.
So if cats are these intimate map makers, horses operate on a completely different, almost unbelievable level of emotional intelligence. Back in 2018, the University of Sussex ran an incredible study. I want to walk you through this timeline because it is genuinely mind-blowing. At 0 hours, researchers showed horses a simple photograph of a human face expressing anger. Just a photo. Then they took it away. Hours later, they introduced the horse to the actual physical person from that photograph. But here's the catch. The person was now behaving completely neutrally, no emotional expression at all. Despite this, the horses who had seen the angry photograph hours earlier exhibited significant continued wariness around that specific person, compared to horses who had just seen a happy photo.
So the crucial point is this. That reaction from the horse, that is not an automatic reflex. That is definitely not a simple survival instinct triggered by a sudden loud noise. They actually remembered the emotional signal from a flat photograph. They formed a cognitive expectation about that specific human, and then they adjusted their behavior toward a completely neutral stranger hours later. That is memory-based emotional reasoning applied across time. That is a level of cognition operating in a way we rarely give animals credit for.
When you stack all of this up, the evidence for cross-species empathy becomes just overwhelming. Step 1. We know they have the limbic neural structures that match human emotion. Step 2. Their responses are incredibly targeted. In a study at Johns Hopkins, dogs who heard their owners crying didn't just panic, they actively regulated their own emotional arousal to calmly push open a door to reach their human. It was a deliberate, context-appropriate choice to be useful. And Step 3. Empathy absolutely crosses biological lines. Out in the wild, elephants have been observed approaching and comforting distressed animals of completely different species. With all of these layered facts, the burden of proof has completely shifted. We're no longer trying to prove that animals have emotions. Skeptics now have to explain why, against all this biological and behavioral evidence, it somehow isn't emotion.
But beyond the lab results and the fancy brain scans, there's one last thing really worth saying here. It's something that doesn't live in any peer-reviewed journal article, but anyone who has ever felt deeply, genuinely sad will instantly recognize the truth of it. When you are in pain, animals do something incredible. They don't try to fix you.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark contrast between us and them. Think about how we humans react to deep sadness. We're deeply uncomfortable with pain. We want to make it stop, partly for the other person, but let's be real, partly for our own comfort. So we offer advice. We try to reframe things. We say stuff like, well, at least you have your health, or everything happens for a reason. We try to push the situation to a neat resolution. Animal comfort is radically different. Your pet has absolutely no agenda. They have no discomfort with the heavy weight of your feelings. They offer pure, unconditional presence. They just come close, and they stay right there in the mess with you.
The animals most skilled at detecting our sadness are also the ones most capable of simply holding space for it. They don't try to explain it away, they don't rush to move on, they just notice. When your dog rests his head in your lap, or your cat purrs against your side after a terrible day, it's this ancient, precise, cross-species gesture. It's a completely wordless communication that tells you are seen, you are not alone. Understanding this science completely changes how we view our place in the world. We share this planet with creatures who have spent millions of years developing the capacity to feel, and thousands of years developing the capacity to feel for us specifically.
Which leaves us with this final, beautiful thought to chew on. From the biochemical genius of a dog's nose, to a cat's perfectly tailored, individualized emotional map, to a horse's incredible long...
Imagine